Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin. I don't know about you, I see all these wonderful scrap-friendly quilt patterns and I think I should do that. And I look at the pile of my scraps and I think I should really do that. But somewhere between let's make a scrappy quilt and choosing scraps, I get stymied. And so that's what today's video is about, choosing scraps for your next quilt project. And I have a lot to say about it. I went through my file on my computer of all of the PDFs that I have of quilt patterns. And okay, so first of all, I have 50 quilt patterns. What? Now, some of them I've already made, in all fairness. And I was looking to see if any of them had scrap-friendly, scrappy, or anything with scrappy, scrap in the first page or title or fabric requirements or description. And out of 50 quilt patterns, 6 were either named something that had scrappy in it or said they were scrap friendly. There were another 7 that when I read the pattern, it didn't say fabric A, fabric B. It said light value or solid dark value or print fabric, which you can fairly easily adapt to scraps. And so I thought that was very curious because I use shirts in quilting and they very much read like scraps, not only because of the shape, but well, mostly because of the shape, because they're in pieces. So 2 shirt fronts, shirt back, and 2 sleeves, not to mention yokes and collars and cuffs. That's a lot of pieces, which ends up feeling very scrappy-ish. I feel like I'm going to say scrappy a lot in this video. And in fact, my fabric stash, I've said before, probably looks very, very similar to some people's actual scrap bin. And that's just the nature of working with shirts. There are lots and lots of wonderful, truly wonderful videos about how to sort your scraps. And I'll shortcut it for you. Most of them boil down to size or color. So, 10-inch blocks, 5-inch blocks, 2.5-inch squares, 2.5-inch strips, 1.5-inch strips. That's the size method. Then there's the, single color. I do mine warm and cool and neutral. That's well and good, but I see all these quilt patterns that say scrap friendly. I just see them all the time, especially on Instagram. And I go, ooh, I love that. And then I look at my scrap bins, which are behind me, and I go, where do I even start? Where do you even start? It's not hard using scraps, but it is sometimes hard to figure out how to use your scraps or view your scraps to start a new scrap project or quilt project. And I think that's why I don't have a whole lot of quilt patterns in my quilt pattern document file that are designated scrap friendly. As much as I love them, I think I kind of shy away from them because I don't know how to start. So fast forward, I've recently made this GeoGems quilt and so many people commented, oh, it reminds me of spring, or, oh, it's got such great spring colors, or, oh, it looks like Easter. And it made me think, maybe a great starting place is to think of your scraps by season and use that as an inspiration for your next scrap quilt. So that's what I want to do today. We're going to talk about choosing the fabrics based on, not just based on a season, but based on your own experience and understanding of a season. And then as you pull from your already sorted scrap bins, then you have a whole colorway already prepared. And it's just a matter of making sure you have enough fabrics for your quilt. So we're going to start with fall, which arguably everyone's favorite season. And of course, I'll say that, and all the winter lovers and all the summer lovers and the fall haters will show up in the comments. That's okay. I get you. Fall has a special magic to it. Just the leaves turning, and the colors can be very, very, very vibrant, all the way down to very, very dull and muted. And it just, I don't know, there's something about it. So in front of me, I have a couple of pulls, and these are all from my scrap bins. None of this, everything that I'm going to show you is from scrap. It's not from my fabric stash, which again, my fabric stash is pretty scrappy. So let's start right here with this pile. And these are just, for me, when I think of fall, this is what I think of. So it's these, the leaves are turning, first yellow, then orange, then, wait, or does it go red first? I think it goes yellow, orange, red, and then kind of a deep red, and then into brown. And so I just got out my scrap bin and my worms, and I literally basically dumped them all out on my living room floor and pulled a bunch of colors that felt like fall to me. I even did a little, purple, plummy, mulberry to go with it. I think that is so pretty. And I have a lot of those colors in my scrap bin. So even if I didn't use, like, let's say, for example, I didn't have enough of this particular orange, like that's all I have, but I might have 6 other oranges, not the fruit, the color, that I can mix and match in a scrap-friendly quilt pattern. And it would have that feel. It would just have that leaves turning feel. I also pulled these kind of greens and browns because I think, besides the fact that it seems like there's a lot of focus on trees in the fall, as we're working through the fall season and the leaves do start turning and falling, this is what we end up with a lot of times. So we've got the evergreen leaves of trees that don't lose their leaves, and then trunks and bark and brown leaves on the ground. And then this kind of funky, of course, facet is funky in this pile, olive green and tan. And so this could easily be integrated into this, or it could be a whole separate colorway. And I have a lot of those colors in my scrap bin. And then I pulled out these greens, which I wouldn't have naturally put those as fall. So I love this fabric, this print. I used it on the back of my oldest daughter's graduation quilt just because it was so happy and foresty and little girls playing. And it just, even though it's not specifically fall, it feels fall to me. They have boots on, and it's orange and red and yellow and green and brown. And it really is just, it feels super fall to me. And then I paired it with this green gingham, which then kind of starts making me think Christmas, and then this kind of grass green. I mean, I just could go all day. Interestingly, I don't have a lot of green either in my stash or in my scrap bin. So if I wanted to make this quilt, I'd be hard pressed. I think it's important when we think about color, and I love to think about color, that there is no one color that's like, this is fall. I could take these greens and put them in a spring pairing and it would work just as well. I could take this brown and put it in winter or even summer. So just because a color is a color doesn't make it seasonal. It's what you pair it with and the associations that you have with it that may make it feel, in this case, autumnal or summery or whatever. And so to that end, I have one other fabric little pairing that I did here. And you're probably thinking, well, that's an odd mix. And the reason why it feels like fall to me is because these are the colors, navy and burnt orange, of my college alma mater. And fall, back then it was quarters, not semesters. Fall quarter at Auburn University, you saw these colors everywhere because it's football season. And of course, when you're first in college, you just get all of the college swag. And so I wore orange and blue all the time. But fall quarter for me also meant gray sweatshirts. I just have a thing about gray turtlenecks, gray sweatshirts, gray hoodies. They feel cozy and fallish to me. So this, if you saw this fabric pairing and you did not go to Auburn, or maybe you're an Alabama fan, and we won't hold it against you, this probably would not feel like fall to you. I might put red and white and you might feel like fall if you went to the University of Alabama. Or I might put black and red and you're like, that's Georgia Bulldog fall right there. So how you feel and the associations that you have about a particular season are not necessarily rooted in the actual color. We could pull this orange out and that might feel like summer to someone. So it's very personal, and that kind of is what makes, to me, quilting so super great, is you are putting your own interests and love and associations and into this work of art that you're making. So that's fall. Let's do winter and look at some wintry things for me, and maybe it'll make you think about wintry things for you. So let's talk winter. I have two really widely opposed color palettes that make me think of winter. The first is this one in the middle, which is the holiday. And so for me, for Christmas, December equals Christmas. And Christmas is Santa and 70s wrapping paper and red and green and Christmas lights. That's not actually what this black is, but it kind of reminds me like we're going out to drive around the neighborhood and look at what everybody lights that they have. So it's pitch black. You know, it gets black at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Feels like it's midnight. And Christmas lights. And then this purple, which I think really has less to do with the actual winter and more to do with kind of the way I was raised in my faith background. There's a lot of purple in the decorations in religious services, especially when I was growing up. There's that association again of the purple, which also could be royalty or also could be, you know, there's 1,000 ways you could interpret that. But for me, these colors together really feel like Christmas. Now, in your house, you may have had a silver and pale blue and mint green Christmas decorations, and that may be your Christmas association. So this may do nothing for you. And that's great, because when you go to pull fabrics, it should be what is meaningful for you. So there's this end of the spectrum, which is this really rich, dense color, and I have tons of fabrics in these colors. So on the other end of the spectrum is this, which is, well, if I had to name it, it would be In the Bleak Midwinter. So if I make a quilt out of this, the title of the quilt is going to be In the Bleak Midwinter. And I saw this shirt, for example, when I was in the store, and I thought, oh, that looks like winter. It looks like it's snowflakes on a gray background. And this gray is very somber, and this almost looks like snowflakes to me. And it's just, if you've lived anywhere that it snows a lot, especially at first, this is kind of what it looks like. Now, I may be from the South, but I've lived in Pennsylvania and Nebraska, and we had lots of days that look like this, mostly on the ground. In fact, this sometimes is what the sky looks like. So super bleak and gray all around, but the sky might have been just the most amazing blue. And so look at that. That's really pretty. That would make a beautiful quilt, I think. And the blue would give it the punch, and then you would have all these neutrals. And by the way, for those of you that are using scraps and shirts, you can make a two-tone quilt. Like, let's say somebody wants a gray and white quilt. Actually, I have a friend whose niece asked for a gray and white quilt. And you don't have to use a single solitary gray and a single solitary white. You can do like this. This would be a gray and white quilt, and it would give it some interest. So that to me is also winter. And then I want to show you one other thing, and this might come as a surprise. My husband and I were walking around the neighborhood the other day. We're trying to do better about our exercise. Well, you could exercise. This is what the day looked like. So this was the sky, clouds, gray, just a lot of gray. And then like it had rained, and so there was muddy, degrading pine needles in our yard. So it's just this kind of gray and brown and blue, kind of dreary, like Eeyore. Just, well, it's kind of a dreary day. And we rounded the corner to our neighbor's house, and they have a line of daffodils in their front yard, and they're just starting to bloom. And this is what it looked like. So that dark green of the stalk and the lime green of the new growth, and then just the tiniest little brilliant daffodil yellow was just starting to poke out. And I went, oh gosh, the daffodils are about to bloom. And that is February in Alabama, in the state, in the southern states of America. And so when I was putting together these winter fabric pulls, if you will. Now, granted, it's just rooting through my scrap bin. That makes me think of like a little fabric pig that's like trying to get down into the scraps. Which I probably actually did look like that going through the scrap bins. I put it together so it's like I closed my eyes and tried to imagine what those daffodils look like against the gray and brown and pale blue of the sky. And when I put it on my table, I went, oh. And I think that would make a beautiful quilt. Now, I have no idea what pattern, and who knows? And again, I say it's the associations that I have. So that's late February or mid-February in Alabama. This would not be the case in Nebraska right now, probably, or Southern California. Your winter might be something completely different. But the idea there is that you just kind of close your eyes and imagine something about that season and those colors that come to mind. Then it's just a matter of finding them in your scrap bin. And that's pretty cool. Okay, it's time for spring. So we have sprung into spring, and here we are. I know I'm beating a dead horse. I often do. That is a horrible phrase, by the way. Beating a dead horse? Why are we beating a horse at all, much less a dead one? Anyway, okay, that's awful. This is what I think of, this right here, when I think of spring. And for me, it's pastels, and it makes me think Easter eggs, and just kind of all of the, little girls' dresses and gingham and the whole deal. Here's some half square triangles that have been cut offs of other quilts that I've made. So obviously I like this color palette a lot. And why not? I mean, it's just really, really pretty. But here's that grass green from the fall. And now it looks completely at home. By the way, seersucker, Southern staple. It has that light spring feel about it. But I, for many, many years, did not care for the color pink. And so if I didn't care for the color pink, look at this variation on that. So it's this peachy, apricot, butter yellow, kind of orangey, which, by the way, I generally don't care for the color peach. And my younger daughter says, just call it apricot. As if that's going to change how I feel about the color. We have a good laugh about that. So, but this would be a really pretty, I think, color palette that would have that almost like when the days start getting longer and the sun is out for longer. It could be a very pretty sunrise or sunset. You could go into those magentas and periwinkles and have the twilight feel, or a little more yellow and bright, and it would have that early morning in early spring. And so again, that's an association. That's not And actually that orange was in the fall pull as well. So the color itself is not really what does it. It's the grouping and then how you feel about them. This I pulled, I would not have said this was spring, except I had this. And I was like, oh my goodness, those look like Peeps. You know, Peeps. Quite possibly the worst candy. I mean, it's literally sugar on top of sugar on top of sugar. I guess that's all candy. It's like, this is a box of spring Peeps. So if you're not like a pastel-y person, but you really love that feeling of, you know, when things are blooming and things are bright and colorful for the first time in many months, that might be the way you want to go. Or you might make a spring quilt or use spring as your inspiration, which there's a difference there, I guess. A spring quilt. Nobody sets out to make a spring quilt, I don't think. But making a quilt and someone saying, oh, it feels so spring, is like, oh, why, yes, thank you, it does. You might do an all green and white quilt, and that could also feel very springy because of all the new growth of leaves. And anyway, here I go again. So spring it is. We got one more season. We'll wrap it up, and I'll stop. I'm not going to say the phrase. All right. Almost all the way around the whole calendar, we have arrived at summer. And funnily enough, as I was pulling fabrics for this video, and I had these two on my table, my husband said, I said, what season does that look like to you? And he kind of paused for longer than I thought was really necessary, because I thought this was a slam dunk. And I was like, it's summer. And he goes, oh yeah, that's not summer to me at all. And if you could have seen my face, I would recreate it, but you really don't need to see that face. I was completely incredulous. What do you mean? So let me explain why this is summer to me, and then we'll finish that story. Every year we went to the beach. When I was growing up, we went to the beach almost every year. And this middle one to me is just the beach. So the sand at the beaches in Alabama, which some people don't even know there are beaches in Alabama. We have mountains and beaches and rivers and plains. We have a lot here in Alabama. Just saying. The sand is actually very light. If you've ever seen those things on like Wheel of Fortune when they say the white sandy beaches, we have white sandy beaches. And so our sand is very much this very light linen that I have. And these colors make me think of the water, of course, and then, the bright sun, bright, strong sun. So that to me is like, that's a trip to the beach. You may remember we did a giveaway when we hit 10,000 subscribers, and I gave away fabric bundles. And one of them was, it was coral and tan and like aquamarine. And I was like, this is like a ocean. And then I did another one that was kind of green and, it was pastels. And that was, I think I said, this is like a spring fabric bundle. So this to me is one of the associations that I have with summer. This one also, I had a bathing suit when I was in the 7th grade. It may be my favorite bathing suit ever, which is really a thing because bathing suits and women, we have a long sordid history. And it was this. It started yellow at the top and it just went through the rainbow and skipped green. And I loved that. And I loved the combination, and it was bright and happy and sunny. So somewhere in my brain, that is summer to me. Which brings me to the thing about that's not summer for Paul. What he said was, to me, summer is evergreen trees and green and brown. And I'm going like making these awful faces. And it was because as a boy, he grew up playing in the woods in the summer. Wasn't in school. He was tripping down by the creek with pine trees. And so fresh cut grass and lots of trees and dirt bikes and mud. That's what was summer to him. I mean, I had to like fix my face because I was making this horrified look like there's something wrong with thinking that green and brown is summer. And if you're a person who goes camping, or if like your family took trips to national parks, maybe that's you too. And so I was like, yeah, but like popsicles and, like popsicles and ice cream and Hawaiian shaved ice. And he's looking at me like, because that was not his summer experience. That was my summer experience, going to the pool in my favorite bathing suit, eating popsicles and coming away with a pink Kool-Aid mustache. And so his summer and my summer were very different. And if we were both quilters, which thank God we're not, because one quilter in the family is enough, although I'm trying to turn the youngest into a quilter. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. If he made his summer quilt and I made my summer quilt, his would look like his neighborhood and mine would look like mine. How cool is that? That is just the greatest. So whether I made a beach summer quilt or popsicles, which somebody actually has a popsicle quilt pattern, lo and behold, Stitchery. And I think it's called Summer Pop. So everybody has their own experience with and own associations with the seasons. I realize that I'm saying it again. But you can take your scrap bin out. Think of something that makes you feel warm and happy in a season. Use that as a guide, as your inspiration, and pull all of those fabrics that fit that visual image that you have of that season. And I'm guessing that if you started there with your scrap-friendly quilt patterns that are in your quilt pattern document file on your computer, it gives you a leg up and would end up with a beautiful, beautiful scrap-friendly quilt. So I hope this has been helpful for you thinking about how to get started on a scrap-friendly quilt project using your scraps and the seasons as an inspiration. I'm Kathy Martin. This is the Catbird Quilts. Thank you so much for watching.